concept to completion, it's probably my favorite topic, being a producer. It's always about how do we get there, right? I'm not a sports person, but it's the equivalent to taking a ball and you're handed that ball and you have to run it down the field while these gigantic individuals are trying to tackle you or they're putting obstacles in your way. And you have to get that ball to the end zone in order to score. And there's all of these barriers for whatever reason they're in front of you. And so it's always about making that process as efficient as possible.
Welcome to the AttractionPros podcast, where we discuss the latest trends and challenges facing the attractions industry today.
We chat with some of the top leaders in the field and provide resources that will help develop your career in this great industry.
I am Josh Liebman. I am obsessed with the guest experience and helping attractions make that their top priority for success.
And I'm Matt Heller. I am passionate about organizational effectiveness, leadership development, and employee engagement.
Now sit upright, hold on tight, and get ready for the AttractionPros podcast. Hey, Matt, how's it going?
I think you know, but I'm going to tell you once again, it's fantastic.
What if we record one day and you're just, you're just doing all right, or you're just having a regular great day?
I will still say I'm fantastic.
Your fans demand that from you. You owe it.
Fans or fan singular? I don't know, but
your fans. Oh, it's terrible.
There.
Question for you.
Yeah.
If I were to say blue sky, what do you think of?
So the first thing I think of is an attraction that I don't think is called Blue Sky anymore, but it was going to be in Malaysia, and it was like the Blue Sky Carousel. But I don't think it's called that anymore. But the other thing I think of is people getting together to think about a project and having no limits whatsoever.
Tell me more about this carousel. I'm not familiar with it.
So it was part of the, when it was the Fox theme park in Malaysia. And part of what I had to do when I went over there was, learn about all the new attractions and the theming and everything. And there was a Blue Sky Carousel. There was all these other different attractions. And I think those names have been changed in a lot of cases as the owners have changed over the last couple of years. But the carousel, I remember being based on certain IP, and now I can't remember what it was. It was the same IP or the same group that did the Rio movies.
Wasn't that DreamWorks?
I should know this.
Oh, really? Yeah. I don't know my IP very well. Anyway. Usually I do. I don't remember that one.
I should have remembered that. But anyway, why do you ask about Blue Sky?
Oh, well, we are going to talk about going from concept to completion today with none other than the one and only Jeremy Grunert. He's the executive producer for FrankNDesign, which is a design firm where they do a lot of 3D modeling and help with design and conceptualization to help theme parks and attractions be able to deliver these massive projects and even smaller projects as well, that you and I go to the parks and we see the final product for it. And what's really cool is I like to think that today's like a look behind the curtain as far as what goes into that. But it all starts with that blue sky and really just letting your imagination run wild and then finding out, well, okay, how do we make it fit in with our budget concerns, with the space that we have, with the IP that we're working with all the other parameters around it. And then getting to the point where you now have a grand opening for something like Hagrid's at Islands of Adventure, which we're going to talk about a little bit today because Jeremy's got a background with Universal Creative, as well as with ThinkWell, as well as with operations, working for Busch Gardens and working for Universal, and just an all-around very interesting guy.
What I think is also fun is we use that metaphor of concept to completion, not only for building an attraction, but for Jeremy himself, because he started off and he tells the story about, he started off as a fan of theme parks. And now he's got what a lot of people would consider their dream job, right? Designing experiences. And, there's a lot that goes into that path and process as well. And, there's a lot of different paths that people can take to get to that spot, but it's really fascinating to hear Jeremy's journey from, being a sweeper to now designing these incredible experiences. So I think that metaphor works for that story as well.
Nicely done. I agree with that too. Very cool to connect those dots and follow the path of his career, which is also really exciting because we were even talking before we recorded the interview with him that all three of us met each other right around the exact same time. And I think if I trace it back correctly, then it would be around the third week of November of 2007, where Jeremy and I met because we were ambassadors for the Iapa Expo. And that is, of course, where we both met you, who you were, overseeing Career Slam and doing a lot of work with young professionals and with the ambassadors. And that's going to tie into the conversation as well and the importance of that networking. And like you said, getting your dream job. Jeremy shares how he got that job. And I think it's some pretty practical advice that most other people probably won't tell you.
Exactly. Yeah. And, I think what's really interesting is that there's things that Jeremy just did because he has a passion and he had a vision and he had, drive to do it. And I don't think that's what's lacking with, young professionals. I think it's kind of figuring out where those doors are open and, how to open the doors. And Jeremy really gives us a great recipe for that. So I can't wait to get to it.
I would say, now that we've talked about the concept of this podcast, let's see through it to completion and get to this interview with Jeremy Grunert. Jeremy Grunert, welcome to the Attraction Pros podcast. It is so exciting to finally have you here with us today. How's it going?
It's going really well. How are you doing?
Doing awesome. Doing really great. So excited to learn all about FrankNDesign and your new role as executive producer. But first, just give us a quick background. How'd you end up in this great industry?
Oh my goodness. Well, it's been quite a journey. About 15 years now, actually. So started from literally, I was a fan as a kid going to the parks. I grew up in Florida, so Disney during the summer and Busch Gardens on the weekends. So I became a fan, and 15 years, about 15 years ago, I was promoted from my role of guest to theme park ride operator. So I started by sweeping in the park. So I started at Busch Gardens when I was 15. I was only allowed to sweep; wasn't allowed to work a roller coaster. So I worked there was something about safety and being 15 years old operating heavy machinery that was a concern. Looking back, that was a good concern. But I was able to sweep, and it was a huge deal for me. So worked in the Egypt area, so the big Montu roller coaster, if you're familiar. And I got to sweep around it every day. And one day I think they're all sick, and I got to work the greeter position, and that was the thing. I got to tell kids they weren't tall enough to ride. Anywho, so I was able to start sort of working my way into rides. And from rides, I moved into, this is a ride operator and then ultimately a trainer. I was able to train individuals on the rides, and then moved into leadership positions. And all of that was largely before I graduated high school. So it was summers and weekends and after school. And that's kind of where the career started. And after I graduated high school, I was able to move to Orlando, Florida, where I went to college and ultimately joined the Universal Orlando family. And I was able to work on dozens of attractions there, commissioning them, opening them, working with the creative teams. And then I really started to sort of diversify what it was that I was doing. So I started branching out into the entertainment department, the events department. So putting on the big Macy's Day Parade or working with the haunted houses and those teams, working the production side, really diversifying sort of my career. And then that's kind of when I ultimately decided that I wanted to design these things. I wanted to build them. I wanted to be a part of that. And at the time, there wasn't a real opportunity to do that in Orlando. So I actually reached back into, I think we're going to talk about it later, but I had an opportunity to be an Iapa Ambassador, and I had made some really great connections. And I was able to leverage some of those connections into a role at Thinkwell Group, which is a design firm in California. And I packed up my car and left for California, and I started my design side of my career. And I was able to work on parks and attractions around the world, moved up from production coordinator to design manager to producer. And I did everything from building magical worlds with the Warner Brothers folks superhero cities, Looney Tune cartoon towns, and then ultimately even get to put a car through a billboard for the grand opening of Fast and Furious. So a little bit of everything. And then ultimately, my journey led me back to Orlando, Florida, which is where I was able to work with the Universal creative teams on some magical additions to the resort. So I was able to sort of partner as a producer with the Hagrid's Magical Creature Motorbike Adventure team. It was my most recent project. And then I was ultimately able to work on the Universal's Epic Universe theme park. So quite a journey, always theme parks, 15 years full of it. And I've loved every minute of it.
That's so awesome. I could listen to those kind of origin stories all day long. I just love to hear how people started off as a sweeper and then, you know, got to now design these things. So you've got a new role now though, Jeremy. So tell us about that.
Yeah. So up until now, I've always represented the client side. I've been client focused. So representing either Universal Parks and Resorts, the Warner Brothers folks, or whatever the case may be. I've always been on the client side. My new role has taken me to the vendor side, where I'm now still supporting a client, but from a very different perspective. And my FrankNDesign is a brand new company. They're about 2 years old, and they were built based on a need for a revamped and renewed process of how we design attractions and how we design theme parks and whatnot. And I was very, very lucky to be a part of the team that helped sort of generate this process through some of our work that we did on Hagrid's, the Hagrid attraction. So we were able to sort of beta test this new procedure and this new pipeline for how to design there. And then having sort of built that team went on to develop it a little bit more. And after my time with the Epic Universe project sort of ended, I joined the FrankNDesign team, and I'm helping them sort of push that new design process out into the market. Up until now, we've predominantly partnered with some of the bigger theme parks that folks are aware of, some of the Disneys and the Universals. But we're looking to sort of expand our services and share our product and what our pipeline and services are with sort of a wider audience, and make sure that's available. That tool is available to everyone, because we think that it's a great way to save time and save money while ensuring that the creative intent or the story, it remains intact. So as a producer with them, I'm kind of the vision keeper and the cheerleader. So whether I'm making sure that the vision, whatever the creative director has stated is what we want, makes it all the way through the production pipeline and then is actually built. So whatever little sketches you see, you always see those concept renders whenever somebody releases, today is actually a great example, the Velocicoaster. They released all of this conceptual art. And if you look at the actual product, which you can see in the parks, it looks just like it. And that's because of talented producers who are ensuring they're kind of taking that creative idea and making sure it gets to the end product. And along the way, they have very talented teams that help them do that. So that it's kind of a vision keeper and then a team cheerleader to make sure that everybody's stays high energy and is able to put the most into these ideas, these rides and attractions, and are able to deliver on the expectations that our fans have. So. A lot of that is what I'm doing with FrankNDesign now, and what I did previously with Universal and Thinkwell Group as well.
That sounds really exciting. Thanks for sharing that. And really cool when you talk about the model of being able to serve other types of attractions aside from Disney and Universal, or particularly those who might not necessarily have the resources to have that in-house creative team, of being able to partner with a firm like FrankNDesign to be able to make all that come to life with the same quality and caliber of the big parks. So I think even looking forward of being able to see just industry-wide, global-wide of what we're going to be able to see from new attractions, new projects and designs and things like that. Can you talk a little bit more about the process? You mentioned the word pipeline. I know that, with FrankNDesign doing 3D models, what is it that is unique and new about what FrankNDesign does now compared to what has traditionally been done in the past from project conceptualization and the overall design of an attraction and large projects that you work on?
Yeah, no, that's great. Concept to completion, it's probably my favorite topic being a producer. It's always about how do we get there, right? I'm not a sports person, but it's the equivalent to taking a ball and you're handed that ball and you have to run it down the field while these gigantic individuals are trying to tackle you or they're putting obstacles in your way, and you have to get that ball to the end zone in order to score. And there's all of these barriers for whatever reason they're in front of you, and so it's always about making that process as efficient as possible. What that process has always looked like is, and I think everyone here has heard the term blue sky, and I'll tell you, it's true. There is a big meeting room where we all go in, and the sky's the limits, but it's maybe not the process that a lot of people imagine it to be. It's much more focused. Nowadays, it's led by what IPs maybe a park has access to and wants to display, brands, the associations, demographics. It's a lot of consumer insights that go into what direction we go. So maybe those the famed stories of the Walt Disney blue skies and whatnot. That's it's a good memory of what it used to be, but I think that process is changing. So it's much more focused. But we start with the big idea. And from there, we move into the conceptual development. So we develop that big idea, and that's how big is let's say we're building a jungle ride, a boat that goes through a jungle. And we have all these ideas of how we could approach that. Then the realistic things start to come in, the budget and the schedule, and we say, well, maybe we can't afford to build an actual forest. So through that concept development, we're basically looking at how much time do we have, how much money do we have, and how are we going to approach actually pulling this off. Once we think we have a pretty good handle on the concept, we move into the schematic or detailed design phases, or design development. And this is where a lot of the work comes into play. And this is actually where FrankNDesign system sort of starts to really shine, if you will. So this is the part where all of the blueprints come from, or the schematics that we utilize to design these spaces. I'm sure everyone's had an opportunity to see those. And they're all, maybe the last time you guys saw them, they're all flat, right? They're 2D, they're pieces of paper. So sometimes it's hard to visualize what that looks like. And that's probably the most critical moment in the entire pipeline for getting input from sort of a vast majority of individuals. So in the space of our jungle ride, we have a ride vendor who has to get a track for the roller coaster to go through. We have facility folks who have to build the facility for where the pumps for the water go and all of that infrastructure, some of the more boring stuff. And then we have scenic vendors who are building rock work around that. We have operations partners who have to operate it, and they have to be able to see how they might evacuate guests from these spaces. So there's a lot of input that has to go into that phase in order to ensure that the final product is deemed successful from every point of view. So as far as the traditional path, we have these 2D drawings, and it's typically produced in a program called AutoCAD, where basically you're drawing lines on a sheet of paper. We at FrankNDesign have created a new pipeline, and with that, we basically then overlay drawings, and we're constantly redlining those, and we're constantly reviewing them. Oh, there's actually air conditioner vents that go this way, so we have to move the show set, or we have to adjust this scenic piece or this prop or whatever, or the ride track can't go there because it's going through a building, so obviously the roller coaster can't go through a building. So visualizing all of that in 2D, it's kind of how it's always been done, but it would be better. We visualize the world in a 3D way. So it would be great to visualize our design in a 3D way, which isn't necessarily a new tool. We've been doing that for a while, but we visualize them through tools or models that aren't actually buildable. So what the FrankNDesign team has done, and what we were able to leverage on the Haggard attraction was a tool, Revit, which is a very familiar tool. It's nothing proprietary. Anyone and everyone has access to it. And these are data-rich models. These models are smart. They know, they're aware. They can generate out element lists. So where props go, they can tell you how many square footage of materials you use. And we can start to instantly collaborate with all of our teams in one shared space. So the HVAC guy who's putting air conditioning pipes through a queue, and if you have a Harry Potter queue, you can't have an HVAC system going through the middle of a Gothic castle. It just doesn't look right. So being able to visualize that in sort of a 3D space and adjust it in advance saves for change orders on the back end. So it saves our client, in this case, maybe a Universal or a Disney, or in the case of anyone else, it could be a Six Flags or anyone really. We save a lot of change orders on the back end when we go, whoops, we didn't catch that in sort of the 2D drawings because we're visualizing it in 3D. So we're utilizing a tool in a unique way, and with the sort of the themed entertainment spectrum and the show sets, in order to sort of build a more robust product up front and then deliver it in the back end. So anyways, after you move through that process, we move into a fabrication phase where everything gets built, an install phase where everything gets installed. And then we move into sort of the programming phase, which is my favorite. Have you guys, have you seen the movie Jurassic Park where Samuel L. Jackson sits there and he goes, "Hold on to your butts"? And he's about to turn the park online. It's literally that moment. So we're about to turn it on and just hope that everything goes well. Luckily, our
is that what everybody says too? Is that like you have to say "hold on to your butts" before you flip the switch? Yeah.
That pretty much everybody sends that meme to everyone the night before. They're just like, okay, and then they turn it on and it hopefully turns on and runs the way it's supposed to. It always goes as planned. Nothing ever goes wrong. But that's the moment where we let folks in for the first time and see how they interact and what the guests are experiencing, and then we make some changes, and ultimately we move into a grand opening phase, which is that's where you see the celebrities and the fireworks and all of that fanfare, which is where our marketing and publicity partners are showcasing this new attraction to sort of encourage folks to come to the park. So that's the full design spectrum. Obviously, players from every seat come to the table, from the operations, from the events, from the entertainment teams, to the design and facility teams. It's a huge effort to produce. When we build these, we're building small cities, very complex small cities with a lot of safety regulations because roller coasters are going through them. And it requires, it's definitely a team effort. And then, processes like I've described with what FrankNDesign's doing, it helps make that more efficient and more collaborative early on, so we can be good team players and ensure that design intent, that football gets to the finish line the way we intended to have it.
That was a great explanation, Jeremy. And I really appreciate the detail that you went into, because I think there's a lot of people that, haven't graduated to working in the industry that are fans, like you talked about being earlier, and they may see some drawings, they may see some things that are leaked on the internet, but they don't truly understand what goes into the design. And then they get their opening day or they see it on YouTube and they say, well, why didn't they do this? Why isn't it going faster? All these different things. So I think that kind of detail, I think is, just as a nerd, I wish everybody understood that, just so that they had an understanding of the passion and the work that goes into this. But one thing I'm really curious about is during that process, you talked about, making that process more accessible. I think to folks, and not just the Disneys and Universals. And even when you were talking about that, you talked about Six Flags. So is the vision that this FrankNDesign process can be used for attractions of all sizes, for any kind of environment or experience that they want to create for their guests?
Yeah, so maybe the best way to put that in a more simplistic fashion, what FrankNDesign provides and sort of what this type of design provides is visualization. So sort of, I'm sure you guys have heard it, everybody has previs. Right now, it's a big previs piece is The Mandalorian. Everybody's very excited about the technologies that's being used behind that TV show, where they're literally filming video screens and sort of comping and putting all things in digitally. So it's sort of this virtual production, if you will. It's not too unsimilar from what we do, in a sense that being able to visualize these spaces, because a lot of folks, to your point, aren't trained on how to read drawings, because it's not an operations manager at a theme park shouldn't have to know how to read a drawing in order to operate his go-kart track. He might be much more in touch with the way that the guest experience and what that looks like in the placement of elements and whatnot within the queues and in these spaces. They aren't necessarily trained to read drawings. Now, there's a lot of operations folk that I've worked with who are excellent at reading drawings and visualizing these spaces within their heads. And then they're able to accurately say, well, we'll need a trash can here and here, or else we'll be constantly walking through cleaning a queue. But being able to visualize that in a 3D way and allow folks to see the space, they're able to comment much earlier. So they're able to, a great example, it's very silly, but an attraction that I was working on, there are a set of lockers, and near the lockers, they're sort of smaller lockers nowadays because they need more of them, and they said we need a sink here, and I go, well, why do you need a sink here? And they're like, there's no sink. I'm kind of trying to understand that. And then thinking back to my days as an operator, oh, when somebody puts a Coke bottle in a locker on its side because they're not tall lockers, it spills and then it gets sticky. So putting a sink next to a bank of lockers allows you to pour out the beverage and then put the empty bottle into the locker so that you can refill it later or whatever the case is. Little things like that, that operational insight, which is incredibly valuable to the creative process. How do you incorporate that note? Or how do you ensure that that individual that's giving you that operational insight is in the room at the right time and can visualize a space and know that that's there or not there? You need a previs, you need a space, a 3D model, which again, we've had this tool for a while now, but it's not necessarily a coordinated model because the models, so you guys see them all the time. A lot of fans actually recreate our rides, which I love watching our fans recreate our rides and try to guess where the roller coaster is going to go. It's a huge compliment, and I've never found a designer who doesn't like it. We just think it's great that they're like mapping out the support columns and trying to figure out where it goes. It's a huge compliment to all of us who are working so hard to deliver the real version. But being able to see these spaces and visualize them, you can comment again up front and sort of working in the Revit tool because all of the other disciplines are there. So we have the air conditioning folks and the folks that are putting the lockers in and the ride systems there. You can see contextually all of these things brought together. It's not necessarily just a pretty model, it's a usable and a buildable model. So having that there, we can actually say, you could put a sink right there because it drops down to a piece of plumbing and it goes out of the building and it would be perfectly fine. We can accommodate that design request so much quicker and ensure that, again, it all goes back to guest satisfaction because as I know Josh this is his big thing, but the guest experience is what's ultimately important. And that's important to the ride operator, to the management and leadership teams, and to the design teams who are building a product to give to the parks for the guests to enjoy. So it's being able to visualize all of that up front and make those decisions is a huge tool. So a company like Universal that's going to have a very robust scenic package for a Wizarding World experience, there's a lot more to visualize. Maybe a smaller attraction at a Six Flags that might have some show, but not as much. Maybe let's say 25% of a Batman ride. They would still be able to benefit from visualizing that space and understanding it. And from that, we can even develop the models into something that's a little bit more attractive. Ours sometimes are a little bit more architectural. They're gray. They're maybe not the most beautiful, but we can texture those models and we can start to sort of make them into something more beautiful. And they could be maybe uploaded to a video game engine and you can actually view the models relatively simply. So it becomes maybe a marketing tool. So it's about, I kind of joke and say our process is the old school way of doing things is somebody makes a 2D drawing package. So they do CAD. Somebody's making a model over here in an animation software to fake a ride through. You have someone over here doing the facility work. So you have all these things that are trying to come together. Why wouldn't you just build one model and then export out? So one model and then unlimited assets. So we'd then be able to provide those to anyone who needs them, and they're all coordinated. So it just seems like a more efficient version of a process that has sort of worked for our industry for 50 to 60 years now.
No, and that makes so much sense too, of being able to house it all in one space. And then, like you said, that example of the sink right next to the lockers is probably not something you're going to think about unless you've had that problem before. So being able to anticipate that, and you said wearing your ride operator hat, be like, hey, 16-year-old Jeremy dealt with this problem. Now we can actually, start to fix it right now, or make sure that we are proactive and make sure we can eliminate it before it happens. Because once you get to that completion standpoint and saying, oh no, we need a sink here, but there's no plumbing hookup for X amount of yards, makes it so much more difficult. So being able to identify all those on the front end, I can imagine just the huge value and benefit to the guest experience, but also to the operators and to everyone else who's involved with that. One of the things that you mentioned earlier was talking about, you love talking about going from concept to completion, and you're talking about starting with blue sky, and then you kind of bring it back down to earth a little bit, look at the constraints, the budget, maybe the physical space. And I've got to imagine that in blue sky, your imaginations can, collectively come up with some pretty wild things that if you didn't have to strip anything out of that, then I know where our industry is at now with what we can do. I personally can't even imagine what all of that collective imagination has come up with. And I think the question from that is, how do you know what to strip out from it? And one of the things that, and maybe this is something that I think about every once in a while, but you look at theming and it's got the aesthetic appeal, it enhances the experience. But, I look at something like a giant rock work or like this wall over here and thinking like, how many tens of thousands of dollars did that cost just to implement that? And that hundreds of thousands, see, exactly. I don't even know, right? My imagination can't even get that far. And saying, why was that kept in? But I'm sure there's so many other things that were taken out from it. So can you talk a little bit about what the process is like of saying, all right, here's our idea, here's the reality, now let's bridge the gap in between?
100%. So there's a different, when we talk about, let's talk about team structure a little bit. So when we build teams, and that's largely a producer's role in a project, is to bring a group of people. An idea has been formed, so we have a lot of folks sitting there coming up with whatever that big idea is. And then you have to build a project team. And as I think we all know, staffing for a ride or an attraction, a show is staffed very differently from a ride attraction. A ride attraction's staffed very differently than a special event. So there's different staffing, and the same applies to how we tackle projects. So a popcorn cart is going to be a little bit differently staffed. It still needs creative input because it's going to live in the middle of Jurassic Park, so it has to look appropriate. But it's going to be a little bit different than a massive dark ride for a Harry Potter brand. So the teams are going to sort of shift and change a little bit. So once you sort of assemble that team, the producer, typically you'll always have, you'll have a project director who's going to oversee the entire piece. And you have three, we call them DAOs, or disciplines of work. So we have sort of the facility team who worries about the buildings and all the infrastructure required to operate something. We have the creative team, which is going to come up with the idea. And we have a show team that's going to deliver that idea. So if the creative team says we need a robot that does a backflip, the poor show team is going to have to figure out how to make a robot do a backflip. But to your question, how do we determine that a robot doing a backflip is what's actually important? And that's where I think there's a happy marriage between a creative director and a producer, where we have to look through, and sometimes in the industry we call them core tenants. So what are the essence of the brand? What is most important? And I've worked with many creative professionals. There's some really great folks out there from the events side of the industry. And I'm sure you guys know Dave Cobb, there's a Gary Blumenstein, Tony Baxter, Mike Aiello. There's some really great creative individuals out there that I've had the opportunity to work with directly. And, it's this moment where I sit with them and we start talking about what's really important, and this essence that I've kind of said, or this core tenet. So, on something, let's look at Hagrid's, for instance. Something that was really important there was an intimate connection with Hagrid. We knew fans wanted to have a moment with Hagrid. He's Harry's father figure, since Harry's father, spoiler, is no longer with us. But he kind of fills that father figure void for Harry. We wanted to have a forest because it is a story based around the Forbidden Forest. And then we wanted speed. We wanted something that was kind of fast. And in addition to that, we also wanted some magical creatures. So maybe we had four core tenants on that particular project. Once we kind of knew the four things that we thought were most important to deliver on, we were able to say, well, we needed to be able to see Hagrid. So is that through a media version or is that through an animatronic? And in that particular case, we have two examples where Hagrid's seen in more of a media fashion, because there was a bit more action going on. And then there was a scene where middle of the ride, we wanted to have a physical version of him. In addition to that, we wanted magical creatures. So you see quite a few of them during your journey. And then again, we have about 1,200 plus trees that were planted to build a forest in the middle of a theme park, which is by far one of the hardest things I've ever done. But the idea being that the core tenets that were sort of decided on by the producer and the creative director led where the money should be spent. Ultimately, placemaking is very important. That's kind of what you're describing with the rock work. So obviously we have to make it feel like a place that is appropriate. It has to support a lot of infrastructure. We have a roller coaster that we have to hide the best we can from guests. So all of the machinery and the electronic rooms and the technical rooms, we have to make a decision. Are those visible or are they not? And if they are visible, then we have to take steps towards theming those spaces. So that rock work that you might have walked by might be there specifically hiding something we didn't want you to see. as opposed to another space where there isn't rock work, because we just felt maybe some landscaping there would do a good enough job telling the story, and we can put the money in front of the guest. So a lot of it also comes down to where we want to put the money, because the money, it's very easy to spend a lot of money on infrastructure in order to a special effect or whatever the case is. But we want that money to be in front of the guests. We want them to see every single dollar we spend so that they have the opportunity to have the best experience on a ride attraction or within a land. So when we start putting too much money into a back of house, which is required for support, we look for that balance, where is just enough that it supports our operation effort, but we still put the majority of that money in front of the guests, which ultimately translates to sales, which keeps the theme park going. So I think that's the best way of answering your question.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. So Jeremy, I know that you have a lot of people's dream job. You know, I work with a lot of young professionals that they're like, I want to design these things. So can you take us back a little bit and talk just a little bit about how you made that transition? Like, what kind of schooling did you have? What kind of contacts did you make? You know, those kind of things that, you know, if a young professional is looking for advice on how to do what Jeremy is doing, these are some clues to the right path.
So I can. And to be honest, I don't want to say now is easier than ever, but I will say there's some advantages that folks have nowadays that maybe that some of us didn't have back in the day. There are, just from an educational standpoint, when I was kind of growing into the industry, there are actual themed entertainment designer degrees. Now, those can cover and encompass a lot of different skill sets and sort of hard skills and soft skills. So whether it's show management or a designer that's going to work in a 3D program, or an interiors person who's going to work in interior design, there's a lot of routes you can take. But what I think is fantastic is that these base level themed entertainment programs exist. Schools like SCAD, it's probably one of the most important, or one of the most well-known ones. They provide an opportunity where you can actually get a degree based on this industry, taught by industry professionals in a lot of cases. So I don't say it's easier, but I think it's a bit more accessible is maybe the best way to put that than what I would have had, which is I started taking classes that were in lighting and drafting. And I took I kind of made my own version of the themed entertainment degree, if you will. And ultimately it was sort of all based around a hospitality degree, honestly. So, you know, I just, at the time, it wasn't something that was available to me, but I took the classes, I sort of distilled down what I thought would be most important for what I wanted to do in this industry, which I knew was more of the management side of the show and developing it. So I said, well, I need to have a well-rounded understanding of the different disciplines I would work with, and it would set me up for success. So from the educational standpoint, I think it's great. Look at the programs. They're all, literally Google them online and find dozens of them. They're West Coast, East Coast, they're all over the place. I think UCF actually in Orlando just announced a themed entertainment program within the last 6 months even. So they're popping up everywhere, which is fantastic. And especially as our industry drives more towards themed experiences outside of theme parks, there's a demand for hotels, retail, as we kind of revive retail from moving to more of an online place. We want folks to come and gather back at malls. And what is the retail experience? So that the industry, it's not always all about theme parks, but it's the experience industry and how we design it. So there's that side. The Iap Ambassador program, which I mentioned earlier, I'm a huge advocate. It literally changed my life in many ways. I literally, my first year was, I think I was 18. I was straight out of high school. I actually met Josh there. That was where Josh and I first met. And I met Matt there as well. He was actually holding up, it was a sort of I think it's called Career Slam. And I was able to meet Matt through that. And Josh was a fellow ambassador. There's a fantastic picture of Josh and I 15 years ago, standing in front of a convention center. A fond memory. But that opened so many doors because you have exposure to folks like Matt, which at the time, Matt had a robust network that I did not have. I was exposed to ride vendors. I was exposed to vendors that do the show set. I was exposed to vendors who do the management, who do the insurance. There are so many sides that even just provide operational insight. And the guy that makes the churros or the Dippin' Dots, like that, even that is important. And then all the education sessions, which you have access to. And if you really want to attend as an ambassador, they strive, it's not always guaranteed, but they strive to get you in the room and to learn as much as possible. So I'll always harp on that being a huge piece if you're able to do it, which I think applications are open right now. apply if you haven't. I think you can even apply all over the world now. When I did it, I think we only had ambassadors in the Orlando show. I don't think it was a global piece, so even more opportunities, but 100% apply. You'll make lifelong friends, fantastic exposure, and just the ability to be immersed by all of it that was huge for me. And again, it changed my life. Without connections I would have made there with my mentor, Cynthia Sharp, who works with the Think Well group. Had I not met her there, I wouldn't have had a lifeline to call several years later when I was ready to jump into the industry. So, or the design side of the industry. So that's a big piece. And then my other two things, LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn is fantastic, and I think more people should use it because back in the day, it makes me sound old, I still had to write letters if I wanted to go work, or I had to write an email even. Just, I had to know the person at Universal Creative or whatever. I had to send Mike Aiello an email or something along those lines to say, please give me a job. It was a lot harder to find people. LinkedIn makes it a lot easier. It makes folks, again, a lot more accessible. So being able to reach out and connect with folks, I add every student that wants to be friends with me on LinkedIn. I literally, whoever wants to just absorb the content that I produce or are able to learn from anything that I'm doing or ask me. Literally the other day I was at a coffee shop in Orlando, and this gal walks by and she just happened to see a theme park thing on my computer screen and said like, oh, I'm a theme park writer. I was instantly able to connect her via, I said, follow me on LinkedIn, and I connected her to 3 different writers. So there's no guarantee of a job, but she was instantly connected with people who are actively doing the piece that she wanted to do in the industry. So I see LinkedIn as being a very strategic way to increase your visibility, and networking is an incredibly powerful thing. I mean, in any industry, but especially in ours, because you have to know the people in order to, secure a spot. Sending your resume into careers at so-and-so company.com isn't cutting it anymore. So you've got to, if you could have the best portfolio, but if the wrong people are viewing it, then you're not getting in. So expanding that visibility and being available to folks is incredibly key. And then my last thing is makeup projects. I don't care what it is you want to do in the industry. There's a great guy, his name's Colby on Twitter. I don't know his handle. You'll have to look him up, but he's there. All the themed entertainment designers follow him. He's a student right now going to school, CalArts in California. And he kept asking, how do I get into this industry? And the advice he was given was makeup projects. Literally, we can't talk about, I can't talk about half of the things that I've done, but make up some projects and start showcasing your skill set. He has models, he has animations. He's created all these things for a fabric, it's a tiki boat ride. It's like Trader Sam's on a boat. It's great. But he's just made up this fictitious project that he's able to showcase because there are no NDAs or any reasons why he can't share the information. And he's showcasing his skills, whatever they may be. Or he wrote a blurb the other day, so just showcased his writing skills. So he's just putting himself out there, and then he's connecting with some of the, I see industry leaders commenting on his tweets and whatnot. So he's putting himself out, and that exposure is helping him. So any of those opportunities, you put yourself out there. And if you don't know how to design, I don't have anything designed, Jeremy. Paint your bedroom. Literally, you have to do a calculation of how much paint you need, what linens you want on your bed, what type of wood nightstand you want, or what kind of lamp you want, or the style. Like, you can instantly build a budget, and you can understand the basics of how a project. Designing your room is no different than designing a $350 million roller coaster, other than there's a lot more stress involved. But it's the same experience. I was still picking paint for a Wizarding World project the same way I would pick paint for my bedroom. It was just a lot more of it. So any of those opportunities, just get started and reach out. And I've not really ever found anyone in this industry that isn't willing to help someone so long as they're willing to listen. And I can say that's true because I quite literally did it myself. So.
That's awesome. And now I have anxiety from the time that I painted my room. So thank you for that, that we've talked about on the podcast before a long time ago. Going back to what you were saying about being an Iapa ambassador, I completely agree. I mean, such an amazing experience, and like I said, lifelong friends and connections. And I can think of just any success that I have can easily be traced back to doing that program through Iapa. Any particular memories stick out as far as things that you like to share just from being an ambassador?
Honestly, it's lame. It's not a good one, but it just felt like every door was open when I was there. And I guess I can better describe that. I could walk into a room and just instantly watch a lecture on immersive gaming in theme parks, or I could just walk onto the show floor and see how churros are made. I can see a ride vendor and understand how much, maybe not how much something costs, but I can understand their sales pitch or how they sell a roller coaster. It felt like I was walking down a hallway and every door was propped open, as where you normally feel like you're walking down a doorway looking for a door that will open for an opportunity. It just felt like they were all open. Everything was available. Nothing felt like it was off limits to me. I could meet anyone I wanted. I could talk to anyone I wanted respectfully. And it was just like free reign of the show. And I think that just like zooming out and just the ability, I think if you remember, they let you in the day before as an ambassador when everyone's setting up. And it's kind of like the night before Christmas, in my opinion. It's like you're watching them put the tree up and the presents out under the tree, and you're getting the first look at the newest ride vehicle from Premier Rides has a new ride vehicle, and you get to see that, or B&M has their new concept out. You get to walk up and look at it, and it's just it just felt like there was endless opportunity. Super kid in the candy shop kind of vibes, but just endless opportunities. Anywhere you wanted to go, anything you wanted to do, it was out there. No one was standing in your way, and it was fantastic. I think one night, I don't know if you were with me, but one night literally just somebody handed me a ticket and said, jump on a bus, and we went to a party at Disney World that night and just got to walk around and tour the backstage area of an attraction they were building. It was just like these endless opportunities to do anything that was cool. The Iapa party, you get to go to that and you get to meet all of these individuals. I was standing in a circle, I think with even Josh, and I'm just talking casually to the guy that owns Bacoma Rides or whatever the case was. And it's just it felt like you can make it whatever you want it to be. Endless opportunity. And that's kind of my favorite memory of all of it is that, and I miss it. I wish they'd still accept me. I don't think that works that way anymore, but I would go back in a heartbeat. But that kind of endless opportunity to just do anything. It just nothing, there was no one saying, no, you can't go to this, or no, you can't do this, or they do a really good job and the program has only developed over the years to offer even more opportunities. So it's only truly gotten better, and goodness, 14 years since I last did that. So.
That's awesome. Jeremy, I wonder if we could go back just a little bit, because we actually just spoke to Cynthia Sharp and had a wonderful conversation with her. Yeah, her episode just aired. So you're the episode right after. But you mentioned that she was your mentor. And I'm curious if you can talk a little bit more about that mentor relationship and maybe how important that was. And maybe that's another avenue that a young professional should pursue.
Sure. In advance, Cynthia, I'm so sorry that I just admitted to the fact that I met you 15 years ago. No, I had a thing. I knew that Universal and I knew Universal Creative and I knew Walt Disney Imagineering were two of the big design firms that you could be a part of. And what they don't tell you is that there's another dozen, whether it be BRC, the Hedema Group, Thinkwell Group, Bezark. There's just dozens of great firms out there. And if you don't know who they are or where to find them, become an ambassador and you'll meet all of them. Or feel free to follow me on my social networks and I'll introduce you to everyone. But there are dozens of design firms and dozens of opportunities. You don't just have to work for Disney or Universal, even though those experiences are equally as great. But I had heard of Thinkwell Group, which was a predominant design firm that did some big theme park projects. Some of the smaller design firms may do a land or an attraction. They don't always go after a whole theme park project. But I had heard that Thinkwell did some bigger projects, and I was intrigued by that. So I did a lot of research online of their website and whatnot. And ultimately, when I got my Iapa Ambassador internship, I said, I'm going to try and find, I know what their logo looks like. I'm going to try to find, and they tell you when you become an ambassador, they said, like, literally when you're walking around the show floor, you're never looking at anyone's face. You're just looking at their name badge. Such a true thing. And then at the end of the week, you're like, my neck hurts because you're just looking down constantly. But I was looking for that little logo or the Thinkwell title. And I was like, I'm going to find a person there and I'm going to talk to them in hopes that maybe I can get a job. And ultimately, I strategically positioned myself in front of, I think I want to say it was immersive, gamification within theme parks. I'm fairly certain that was the meeting. And I was, as an ambassador, you set up the pencils and the note cards, and you have your duties. You make sure all the chairs are nice and aligned. And then when the speakers arrive, you welcome them, you scan folks into the meeting, and then you're welcome to stand in the back of the room and listen. But I had a different mission. As I was getting people signed in, I knew that a think well person named Cynthia was coming to this, and I was ready for her. I was going to introduce myself. I had a business card. I was ready to just meet her and figure out what comes next. And I was able to welcome everyone. And then somebody walks up, and sure enough, they had a little think well. She had a little think well pen, and I was like, "That's her." I think I stood up from the table. I knocked a bunch of pencils. It was completely ridiculous. And I was like, "Oh my goodness, I'm so excited to meet you. I'm Jeremy. I want to work for your company, blah, 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 blah." And she just goes, "Oof, okay, let me go do this speaking engagement. And then I'm going to come back and we'll talk." So anyone who knows me will know that I can get out 30 minutes worth of a conversation in 30 seconds. I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing, but I think she had my social security number by the end of my blurb. So she was going to be able to find me. But anywho, I was able to sit in the back of the room. It was a very interesting piece. It's great. Ironically enough, I was able to work on some gamification things with her within theme parks later on in my career. So sort of funny how cycles happen. But anywho, at the end of it, she came back to the table and she said, "All right, what do you want to do?" And I said, "Theme parks." And she's like, "You do realize that you have to understand the disciplines?" And I said, "Sure, theme parks." So she said, let's help you better understand the full process. And she was able to sort of illustrate what the process looks like, what the roles look like, what ThinkWell would hire for, and then took the time to sort of inquire what have you been doing to prepare yourself for that role. And so I was able to speak to, I worked largely frontline in the theme parks because I thought that was important. I've swept things. I have operated things. I ultimately performed in things. I managed things. I looked at the most diverse spectrum of things I could do that were related to the subject matter that was most important to me, i.e. theme parks. And I became the subject matter expert on all those things so that in the event that I could finally get my job, I would have a base understanding. And she goes, "We love people like you because you understand how these things operate." She goes, "When we bring people into ThinkWell, they're top tier architects, they're art directors, they're folks that actually they don't know how these things operate, and in a lot of cases they don't care because they want to make sure that it's absolutely beautiful, or they want to make sure that it's well planned, or whatever the case may be. And it's not necessarily important to them how it operates, but it is important to the client. So someone has to be watching out for that." So she said, our show management team, our producers, our coordinators are the ones who oftentimes review these drawings and review these creative ideas and say, "Hey, by the way, if you're going to do a character meet and greet, you need to have a space in the back where the characters can change out of their costumes, because if you don't have a space for that, then it's not going to be very successful." She said that could be your superpower. Anywho, fast forward a little bit. I actually was friends with her for several years before my opportunity at ThinkWell popped up. And she checked in with me frequently. She was a great mentor, just always offering me up. Have you attended this? Are you going to be at Iapa this year? Can I introduce you to this person? She made, it's unfortunate because I know she offers this to everyone, and I can only imagine what she goes through with this. But she must have hundreds of folks constantly emailing her and texting her because she's always willing to offer up her time. And sometimes it's quick. I think one year she passed by me and she goes, "This is Dave Cobb, talk to him." And she just kept going. And that was all I saw that year. But I met Dave Cobb, who's a predominant creative director and was actually responsible for the Warner Brothers Park in Abu Dhabi. And I actually got to work with him on that project. So she was always connecting and kind of just kept helping me pull at threads to learn more and to, "Jeremy, have you tried this?" Or could you create a visual resume was a suggestion she made. She said, typically everybody has just a standard sheet of, just standard letter page. I've worked at Busch Gardens. I did this, She goes, "Have you done a visual resume?" And I said, "I don't know what that is." She goes, "Well, just put some pictures on a page and present yourself in a different light. Sometimes how you're perceived, that might improve how you're perceived, even if it's communicating the same information." So always just giving me little tips and tricks. And she still made me do a lot of it on my own, but she would help guide me along. And she was a fantastic mentor. I would recommend anyone who has the opportunity to get close to her. She will just crack open doors left and right. And to this day, I still go to her even after I've had the opportunity to sort of go through a full sort of from where I started, which again was as a guest in the parks, and then moving into operating rides, to designing rides, and to designing theme parks. And while I certainly have a bright career ahead of me, I'd like to think, I have now kind of fulfilled the standard project cycle from an idea all the way through to completion. I still go to her for tips and advice on how to approach things and how to be a better leader as through those processes. You know, designing can be a really rough process, and the time, money, schedule, little triangle that everyone talks about, you can't have all three. It's true, and typically time's the one that hurts the most, which ultimately has impacts on the teams. So I can even think of a few years ago where I was looking to her for some guidance on how to be a better leader within the creative suite and, you know, doing creative projects and whatnot. So anywho, all that being said, literally, you know, a fantastic individual in this industry. There's dozens of folks like her, but I'm beyond grateful for every opportunity she's provided to me and then guiding me through the years. So really great relationship. And I would encourage anyone to find their own version of a Cynthia or a Cynthia. And there are plenty of them in the industry. And again, like I said, I've never really seen anyone in this industry not be willing to help someone in some way, shape, or form. They may only be able to donate a little bit of their time, but it's not always going to be someone holding your hand. There's still a big effort that you have to do on your own, but there is, I've never seen anyone turn down. So, and if so, there's always another person out there who's willing to help you, connect you to someone, or to provide you some insight that you may not have had, which helps you along your way.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And a huge testament to Cynthia for being an amazing mentor for you, and a huge promo for last week's podcast episode. So if you haven't listened to it, definitely listen to our full interview with Cynthia there. And also, I just love, it's such like unconventional career advice of like, go to a trade show and look for this specific person, but you just show how you just made that work and frankly, like extended that and said, now here's what became of it. Now here's, you know, where you are today. So it's even those really small things that you can do, whether it's at trade shows, events, Iapa, or any type of networking, that will pay dividends over and over again, you know, for the rest of your career, really. So Jeremy, this has been an awesome conversation. We loved getting the chance to chat with you today. If people want to say hi to you on the socials, if they want to get hold of you or learn more about FrankNDesign, where would you send them?
So I'm wildly available on all the social platforms: Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook. You can find me through Matt or Josh, Jeremy Grunert. Or if you want to reach out to FrankNDesign, at FrankNDesign, on, again, social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, we're everywhere. So you reach out through either avenue, or even just the FrankNDesign.com. We have a great place to reach out if you have any additional questions, and you can get me through there as well.
Awesome. Jeremy, well, this, again, was a great conversation. So great to catch up. We're going to end this a little differently than we have in the past, because usually it's Josh or I that say the signature sign-off line, but some people may recognize your name as the first person that always likes our posts when they come up. You're like the first name that shows up. So I want to give you the honor. I don't know if it's an honor, but I want you to say our signature sign-off line. If you could just say, "We are all Attraction Pros," and sign us off, that would be fantastic.
Well, what an honor. Okay. Well, let me give it my best shot. We are all Attraction Pros.
Thanks for listening to the Attraction Pros podcast.
Make sure to subscribe so you can tune in when new episodes release. And even better, please leave us a review on iTunes.
For more information, visit AttractionPros.com.